back east to manage the station. He came in and he said, okay, there's no room at this station for part-time personnel. He told the program director, fire all the part-time personnel. 80% of the on-air staff was part-time.
Right.
And so he did. He called us up and said, sorry, but I have to let you go because under new management. We gotta let you go. And next day I got a call back. Said, you're all hired back.
Yeah, exactly.
Suddenly there was no one on the air.
No, I did not do that. I was definitely like, you're all done. So.
I had a tough time. I was 19 years old going to one of the top 4 stations in the country, WFIL, back in the day. And everybody was maybe around 30 plus. And boy, did I get hazed. I got hazed big time. Just as I was stepping into the to do my first show, I was nervous. And Dan Donovan came on and said, okay, I want to introduce you to KC Hill. His only previous experience is being a taxi cab dispatcher in Scranton. and that's how he left it. So we all went downhill from there.
Did he insert a rim shot?
He didn't need to. He was brilliant. So, Chris, that answers your question about why I'm not still in radio?
Yeah, Brad Pitt, Moneyball, great movie. I sent you a link, Alex.
I'll watch it. Absolutely.
You'll like it on multiple levels.
Yeah, don't get me started on old radio stories. It's like a different life, different place, different time.
Gee, looks like it's going to be a short first hour. We need some more questions.
Well, we never need them, but we'd like them.
Well, we could pontificate. Yes.
That's exactly what we do. We will chew on them, as Alex likes to say. So there'd be a lot of chewing. If you'd like to contribute to the program, be a producer and send us your question. You just stop and do one question. That's all you need. And I encourage the panel to do the same.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about digital media production. And our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we're going to talk about generative fill in Photoshop specifically, but just basically show a couple examples of it, talk about what it can actually do and how we're using it in some of our productions. And so a couple of us, I think, have some things to show, and we'll show you those in the second hour. So if you've got questions about that, go ahead and throw those in. And if you've got general questions, of course, you can throw them in for the first hour. We have our CG expert, Alan Hawks, here. So if you've got questions about computer graphics, go ahead and throw those in. Today, of course, is the graphics day. And a couple of us do a little bit of graphics there. So good day to ask graphics questions for the first hour. And we'll go ahead and jump into those questions. Mitch, what do we have?
Thanks, Alex. First in is Bo Cordell from Charleston, South Carolina. Bo asks, I'm in a market for a new MacBook for basic coffee shop, airplane type personal use. VS Code, photos, very light Photoshop, AE, FCP, work. The 16-inch feels a bit big for my needs. Would I regret the 14-inch Pro?
Go ahead, Bill.
I don't think so. They're incredibly fast. They're incredibly lightweight. The Pros are a little heavier than the Airs. And my question is, if you're saying it's for personal use, not for business use, and whether, depending on whether or not you need the extra ports for I/O, I've been really happy with my MacBook Air 14-inch. I have it in the voice booth, but when I take it out on the road, that's the computer I take with me most of the time. And these new M-series processors, particularly I've got an M2 in both of these, are just so fast that I've gotten to the point where the machine's power is just not an issue anymore. They cut through even complicated work so fast these days that I would think that for me, the question comes down to how much I/O port connection do you need? If you're going to use it as your desk, as a regular computer, more ports is definitely more better. If you're going to use it just on the road for lightweight work and you only need a hard drive or maybe a little dock and a couple of peripherals, you'll be fine with the Air series and you'd be easier to travel with. That's my 2 cents.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I agree with the Air idea, but you might wait because there's been some rumblings that they may be releasing a new MacBook Pro this September. So that's been with the M3 next generation of silicon coming out. So look at the rumor mill and see if you want to wait until then, because you might want to kick yourself if you buy it right before they announce a brand new line of exactly what you were looking for.
Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I might be able to give you a bit of practical advice on this because I use a 16-inch MacBook Pro as my main workstation, even as for high-end CG work. And to Bill's point, I mean, these things cut through most anything. I had a unique experience where I was borderline regretting a 16 because it is a little bit cumbersome, right? When I try to carry it on the road with me, and I had to get my 16-inch serviced. And I ended up replacing it with a 14-inch of the same specs, and it was too small for me. So I liked the portability, but it wasn't good for a main workstation, really. So it really kind of depends, but based on what I'm seeing about your particular usage, I think a 14 would be fine. If you need the desktop usage, you can plug in as many monitors as you want. In terms of power, you're not going to have any problem at all. But if portability is your desire, if it's your goal, the 16 is a little bit cumbersome. But if you plan on using it mostly at a main workstation, then I would go for the 16. But in your case, I would probably recommend 14.
Good, Mitchell.
I would be concerned because you're going to be crunching numbers with After Effects and Final Cut, whether the Airs would be too hot. The Pros, even though they're more powerful, have fans in them. There's some kind of air handling going on there. So I just think that should be a consideration. Honestly, I haven't had one of the newer MacBooks, so I don't know from practical experience, but it used to be an issue.
Good, Chris.
I'm concerned about the state of our society when we listen to Alan talking about a half-inch thick supercomputer being cumbersome. I'm worried, Alan. That's a pretty powerful computer to claim that it's cumbersome. And also, I love the fact that Courtney is talking about Mac rumors. Just made my day, Courtney.
I will say I have a 14-inch, the 2019. I don't have the M series, but I have the 14-inch, and I hate it. I hate it. I don't travel enough to make it worth buying another laptop, but I think it's persuaded me that I don't like using laptops anymore. So that's how I feel about it. I do use it on the road. It is, the one thing that I like about the 14-inch laptop is that in my Rush 24 backpack, it will fit in that little slot in right against my back with an iPad. Those two will fit in there. I don't think a 16-inch would fit in there. So I have to put it in the main part of the bag. So that's the one thing that I like about it, but that's the only thing I like about that laptop. And so I think that it is again, I keep on buying Mac Minis because I need them here. I don't travel enough to make it worth it, but every time I try to do anything on a 14-inch, I'm just like, I can't believe I ever thought this was going to work. And admittedly, what happened was I had a 14 and a 16. The 14 was kind of like the little shuttle, and the 16 was there. And then we started using my 16 in the office, so it's still there. It's running Softron now, I think. And I just didn't think it was worth buying another laptop because I don't travel enough. But wow, I do not like the 14-inch. Next question.
Next one in from Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York. Mike asked, "Morning, everyone. Adding copyrighted music to content in TikTok doesn't allow you to manage the volume of the music. Music's lower than the speaker. If I bake it in, it's muted and flagged. How would the panel approach solving this? 30-second rule? Thanks."
I'll go with Courtney.
I would not depend on using the 30-second rule because you might get flagged by the bots anyway. There's a number of websites out there that offer cleared music.
But I think he wants to. I mean, what's happening on TikTok a lot of
sense.
times is that they're using. I mean, there's music that you can use that's in TikTok. So these are music tracks, oftentimes that are copywritten, but people. I mean, culturally, people want to use them. Use those songs. They don't want to use. They don't want to. They're not. He's not trying to use general music. He's trying to use a specific song. I think that's the.
Oh, I didn't say that. I'm sorry. He just said music.
Yeah, I mean, this is just in TikTok. You see
and it says it's flagged and muted. So I assume.
It does. So what happens is that if you use the song, when TikTok lets you add the song, there's songs that you can get in TikTok. And if you grab those songs in TikTok, you can make it another track and you can talk over it if you want. But it knows inside of its system that that's one of the ones that it provided for you. If you take that track and bake it into yours, it doesn't have the metadata anymore to know that it's a TikTok delivered song. It just says you embedded it in. And they do that because they can't manage the residuals and the payments based on that if you bake it into your video, and so they immediately flag it and turn it off. So that's I think that's the challenge. Yeah, it's
you youngsters with this TikTok. I'm gonna have to look at that one these days.
I just had a conversation. We're gonna have somebody come on and talk about Snapchat, and that was kind of eye opening for me. Like just the because my kids, my kids, they don't use any social media right now, but their friends have Snapchat, and that's like all they use. Like they tell their parents, go ahead and try to contact us on Facebook because we don't know anybody there. like it's the whole new Snapchat is the thing, which is amazing because you just thought that Facebook was going to roll over them, and they've somehow owned it. Now go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, all true. Everything you just heard. Interesting thing about copyright rule is that so many people think that if it suits their situation, then it must be legal, and that comes down to fair play, using just 30 seconds of a song. None of those things are truly copyright protected. So be careful. Make sure you get the right clearances to do it. And as has been said here, if you pick the music that they provide, you're not going to have an issue with that.
Well, the challenge really is that it's not about copyright law. So people think that this has to do with copyright law. It is understanding the algorithm, because all of these companies have to figure out some kind of algorithm to protect copyright infringement, and they build an algorithm that looks for a certain thing and has a certain set of rules. They're not looking for what the law is. They're looking for what can they manage. And so what YouTube or TikTok or others will flag has to do with their system, not the absolute law. So you can, even if you're using fair use or a shorter piece, it doesn't really matter, because if the algorithm identifies it, it's going to identify it. And they can't work at that level of precision. Next question.
Even 10 seconds is going to be a problem, or 5 seconds. It's how quick the algorithm catches it.
Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida. Do you think that it would be feasible to create a 3-camera road kit for small panel discussion live streaming with OBSBot Tail 2 PTZ cameras?
Good, Bill.
The word you used was feasible. Sure, it's going to be feasible. Now, here's what I discovered. I once did a tour where I have it travel around to a bunch of cities and do presentations. And within the first week, I could tell which parts of my system were going to fail over the course of the next 4 meetings, because some of the little fiddly connections in terms of roadworthiness just weren't making it. So it will be feasible. It will probably work. OBSBots are very small kind of robotic cameras, and I would be concerned, unless you treat them with kid gloves, the longevity in them, I would suspect, would be tough on the road. Now, if you're just doing a few dates, not maybe a problem, and it probably work just fine. If you're going to be doing this consistently, I think you'd very quickly move up to more robust hardware and networking stuff, because you just need it to plug in and work, and road is hard on gear. That's my 2 cents.
Go ahead, Courtney.
It looks like a competent camera. It's got a Sony CMOS sensor and 12 megapixels and all that good stuff. Its main claim to fame, apparently, is going to be its AI, the ability to automatically track things, do gesture-based moves for individual video bloggers, vloggers. It should be great. But using 3 of them, I guess it's USB only. I'm not sure, or how to do a live show with it. You would probably have to use OBS or something that takes multiple USB cameras in and switch. And I'd be worried about if it has this AI tracking that, suddenly 2 cameras would start tracking the same person instead of staying on the person that they're supposed to track, and you might run into problems with it. The AI getting confused about what its duties are. You can lock it onto one person, I suppose, but then you lose the ability to track their head movement, things like that. So I don't know. It remains to be seen. I didn't see what the interface is on it. It doesn't seem to say so. I'll have to look into the tech specs.
Yeah, I think the software is going to be the thing. The thing. You could absolutely do it. I mean, I think that we've built ones. I'm actually building one with the Link 360s, so a 3-camera system that would do that. I also just got this. I haven't been able to test it yet. This arrived. This was something that someone had asked about earlier, which is the Zato from Atomos. And so what this does, I'm about to test, is it should be able to have the webcam, so the Link 360, go into this monitor. And then I can either send it out HDMI back into the switcher, or I can stream it from this. It's funny, this came with an Ethernet adapter. I was like, what am I going to do with the Ethernet adapter? And then I realized, it's because I can actually, with the Ethernet adapter, stream, RTMP from this little monitor. So anyway, so I'm testing that right now, or about to test it. I think that you could probably put it together. As Bill said, I mean, I would probably build some custom stuff to hold the cameras, but they should be fine. I think that one challenge that you may have with those is just USB length. So remember that you may have to use fiber USB connections to get that, and whether they can carry power. I don't quite understand how that looks, but that'd be the only thing I'd be really concerned about. But for simple interviews, I bet you this would work great. I'd probably turn off all the AI. It looks like it does have presets. I was looking at the website, so you can probably set a couple presets for each camera. What I don't really understand is for multiple cameras, how does the interface open? Do you have to open 3 instances of the controller? Do you have to, how do you set that up? And that's something that both, I think, and what we're hoping for is to see more remote control. I know that other OBSBots handle OSC, so combined with OSC, you could end up with something really interesting where you can start tying things back together, so you can have OSC commands of where those cameras go and what they do based on what you're hitting on a piece of software. So I think it could work really well. The chip is a little small. I'd love to see them build a camera like this with a 4/3 inch chip, or a Super 35 chip, or even a 1-inch chip. Sony makes in a 1-inch chip that would be really amazing inside of this. So I'd love to see them take that one more step up. But I'd love, if you use it, definitely let us know how it works. And if I'm going to do some more research on it. It looks like a really interesting camera. Next question.
From Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Paul asks, an artificial intelligence firm in Spain has AI humans that allow people to real-time modify their voices. What other applications can you see for this?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Oh, holding up banks, things like that. If there's tons of voice modifiers out there. In fact, the mixer that I'm speaking to now has them. I can talk like a variety of different sounds, and I can be a munchkin or a monster. So they are available built into the Rodecaster Pro 2. Just get you one of those so you can think of a variety of things for recording voiceovers for children's books, narrating your children's books. When the monster comes in, you can do the monster voice very easily.
Yeah, it's interesting time. But I think for a satire, for comedy, but obviously you can have nefarious things, but you could do a lot of things also with it that are probably a little less. Radio plays that have the voices jumping around a lot. Those are all things that would be really interesting. You could almost have something set up where you're hitting a different button while you're talking, and it would be changing the different characters. And so it'll be interesting to see how it works out. Next question.
Jack Ruppel from Breckenridge, Colorado, asking, in the latest XR headsets, hand tracking and face tracking is possible. Could ASL be used as an input interface instead of a QWERTY keyboard? QWERTY is now obsolete. ASL as programming input method? Thoughts?
Go ahead, Bill.
Jack, this was an interesting thing. I hadn't thought about ASL as one of the kind of offshoots of this 3D space tracking that we've been talking a lot about since Apple announced the Vision headset thing. Now, I do think the eye tracking sensors and the rest of that built into Vision has brought this idea of capturing space to kind of a different level. And I'm not sure that's going to come down to something simple enough that a person doing ASL could wear it, but who knows? Obviously, the state of the art in tracking things in space is going to accelerate dramatically because of this. So there may be at some point something you can wear pretty simply and have ASL tracked and auto-translated. That would be awfully cool, I think.
I think the only issue I would say is that if you're typing, you can type a lot faster than you can do ASL. So I don't know why you would do it. I think that's the only thing that I would say is that potentially, I guess ASL to voice or something like that would be something that you could do, but it's not. So also from the angle of the cameras on the headset with occlusion and everything else that's going on, it's one thing for a headset to be able to see certain gestures that it's programmed for. It's another thing to be able to read the entire ASL alphabet, and understand what those shapes look like. I think the chances of it doing that anytime soon is very low. So I think that the QWERTY keyboard probably has a couple more years. Next question.
Next question in from Rick Coombs in Columbia, Tennessee. What is the best or easiest way to get 1 to 1.5 hours of video off of my iPhone 13, pardon me, that I have recorded for someone else to edit?
What I would do is I would sync it so that it shows up in your photos library. So I'm assuming that if you're shooting with your iPhone 13, you have a photos library. It might take a while for that to sync properly. You can connect your iPhone to your computer. It'll show up as a device inside of Photos, and then you can import directly. You may want to do that because that's going to be a really large file, and waiting for it to do it over Wi-Fi might take a while. So you can pull it off directly from there. There's also, I think Image Connect is like a weird little app that has been hidden in, I haven't used it in a long time, but it's a weird little app that Apple has that will pull stuff off of iPhones faster. And so I'm not sure if it's in the latest OS, but anyway, pull it over and then export it from Photos. I would do it that way rather than trying to do any other way of grabbing it or sending it. And then you can upload it to, the cloud storage of your choice, whether that's Frame.io or Dropbox or Google Drive. If you are shooting in HDR, you have to be careful of the metadata. So that's a little bit more complicated. We'll answer that another time. Next question.
Jack Ruppel from Breckenridge, Colorado. Why is development for the Meta Quest and Quest 2 and later models so difficult? And why have the hardware manufacturers made it easier to produce 3D content?
I would say, why haven't the hardware manufacturers is my guess of what that was. The real challenge with MetaQuest or the Quest 2 developing for Oculus in general, the real challenge has been is they didn't really build a development pipeline. They're expecting us to use Unity or Unreal or other things like that. They're not building something that's custom for the system. That's the big advantage that Apple has with what they're doing with Vision, is they really built an entire library that you can grab onto that's customized for what they're doing. And that's not what Meta chose to do, because they don't do software development like that. And so I think that they didn't really. It's tough, to build stuff, and you don't have the same interface guidelines or the guardrails when it comes to interface to make it look good. So you really have to be on the Apple platforms, you don't really have to be a designer if you just follow the instructions. On the other platforms, a programmer has to be a designer, and that's why so many of the interfaces look so bad. So, because programmers and designers are usually not the same person. so anyway, Apple kind of spoon feeds you a lot more of the interface than the other platforms, and so I think that's the real, one of the real challenges. As far as 3D content is, again, all of those things are a little bit difficult. They're getting a lot easier to generate with photogrammetry and other things like that. It's getting easier and easier to do that, but it's still a little bit of a lift. Just a quick reminder that, of course, you can ask questions for both the second hour when it comes to generative AI or the first hour. We still have plenty of time to answer your questions. So if you've got questions about digital media production, make sure to throw them in right now. Also, you can vote on those questions so we know what order you'd like us to discuss them. All right, let's go jump into the next question. Mitch?
Michael Patera from Poland asks, I have a problem with audio files .wav recorded in Reaper on Mac OS. Files are long, about 9 hours. And the problem is when the editor wants to open that file in Premiere on Windows, there's an error. Files could not be imported.
Go ahead, Courtney.
It's probably, it depends on the number of tracks that are in those WAV files. 9 hours is a very long file, and file size frequently in WAV files is limited to 4 gigabytes. So if you find your files are larger than 4 gigabytes, you might have to divide them up in Reaper and save them out into 1 hour files each, and then reassemble them in your editing software after you get them into Windows or Premiere. That might be the best way to go. And if it's like multi-track WAV files that are 9 hours long, you may have to split them apart from polyfile to mono files, which splits the individual channels apart, each one into a separate file. That might be another way to bring it in. As a mono version, and you can use a program like Wave Agent from Sound Devices to split those poly files into mono and still maintain time code if you need to do that in the metadata.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, Courtney pretty much covered it. Just keep in mind that a .wav or even a MOV file is a wrapper. There could be something else inside there that it's not happy with. It could be the length of the file, which is exceeding some type of OS issue. If you're working in Premiere on Windows, you might try opening it also in Adobe Audition, since that's a Adobe program, and it might give you the opportunity to look inside to see what the cart chunks are doing or the metadata. As Courtney mentioned, there may be something just a little off that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a Windows file size issue. I would see if you can open it in Resolve. You can download a free version of Resolve and just see if it'll open there. Just as eliminate all the options that are there, but it does sound like you're probably going to have to chunk it. See if it's over 4 gig or 4. Is it 4 gigs? 4 gigs per. Yeah, and there's, there may be a setting in Reaper. I know that in other applications that we've had that are PC compatible, there's an auto segmenting that can happen with the files as well. So it'll sit there and just roll over that segment when it gets near 4 gigs. So that's another thing to look at as a feature. I don't use Reaper enough to know whether that's there or not. Next question.
Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, Colorado. Synesthesia in Musicians, Joni, Jewel, and others. What are your favorites?
Go, Bill.
Synesthesia is an interesting thing. That's basically when one sense kind of triggers another sense. And for a lot of people, Particular vocalists, vocal to a sensory feeling is pretty common. It's really the basis of the whole ASMR trendy thing, which is if you hear somebody whispering, it causes kind of that feeling to go up your back, that little, ooh, that's an interesting sensation. I'm not sure that specific musicians have been tied to it as much as specific sounds and things like that. Maybe it's just I'm ignorant of the fact that people think that Joni Mitchell and Jewel and other female performers provide that sensory thing for them. It's something about the tones or something about just their perception of the artist. It's hard to say. It's a really interesting phenomenon, but it's pretty. It's not specific. It's not you hear this song and you're going to get this response. I think it's pretty individual to people. That's been my experience, at least. Go
ahead, Courtney.
Tori Amos, you get the mixture of that Bosendorfer grand piano with the low notes in there with her whispery, whiny voice is really quite synthesiastic. I'm synthesiastic about it, yes. Tori Amos.
Next question.
And it's from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. What do you use to keep a journal or notes if you do this on a daily basis?
John?
Started off with Microsoft OneNote, which is actually a pretty decent application. Moved from that to Evernote because it was compatible on both platforms, and now the same application that everybody else uses, which is Notes, that's built into operating system on iOS and Mac OS.
Good, Bill.
Yep, that's me. Notes. It's the simplest one. It's on all my devices, and it's the one repository for all of my thinking. I will say, if you are looking for something specific to do this, want a journal or something like that, I flitted for a while with a program called Writer, and the thing that I liked about it is it shuts down all sensory perception. There's nothing on your screen except a deep gray page and a place to write. It also has built into it gentle music, and you can choose the music. So if you want to if you're the kind of writer who likes to descend into just paying attention to your words and get as many stimulus away from you as possible, your desktop, everything else, I actually enjoyed that for a while. I went back to Notes for almost everything because I wanted the one point of reference, but I enjoyed that. So maybe give that a look.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I've been using Google Keep Keep, because it's cross-platform. If you're not just in the Apple world, you can share it across devices. And it allows voice input, hand-drawn input, picture input, notes, all that kind of good stuff. And it keeps it in online and in the cloud. So it's accessible from open up your Keep account on any machine, and there's all your notes.
Go ahead, Alan.
I've come full circle on this one, actually. I've tried every note-taking system you can imagine. I have an ADD mind that tends to be all over the place, right? But I come back to basic notes. I use Notes because I have my phone everywhere, and if I have a thought that I want to get down, I just go to my notes and I just keep a linear list. And I've gone back to old school Notepad, and I'm happy with it. I've come back to actually analog. I use a pen and paper. I have a linear note system. I just, train of consciousness, whatever pops into my mind, I write it down. And there's something about that connection. You know, we're a little bit disconnected in this society, and something about the connection with pen and paper that I personally find kind of therapeutic. So.
Yeah. I've been trying to do that. I have notepads and notepads and notepads of notes that when I was designing a lot of Pixel Core and everything else that I used. And so I was like, I could go back to that. And, because when you find them, what's nice about them is they are analog, and I didn't lose those files. Like I just found a stack of them in my garage, and there's all these old ideas and things that I ended up using some of it and so on and so forth. But the problem is I can't, on a day-to-day basis, I don't know where that's going to be, and carrying that piece of notebook, that's been the hard part for me, is that I just find that Apple Notes means that whatever device I have opened, I throw stuff into, and I think that the problem is I'm cutting and pasting and putting links into it, and it was hard for me to do. But I do have 2 notepads over here that I keep on, and a fountain pen. I felt like there's something classic there was something very organic about a fountain pen with a pen and paper, but I haven't, there's like 2 pages. I've had it for like 3 months, and there's like 2 pages of stuff in it. I keep on, it's aspirational right now. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
It's aspirational. It's also not very searchable. That's the problem with putting stuff on paper. you can't find it again, what's the point in having it?
Well,
I have a solution for that.
Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
I'm sorry to mean her.
No.
I have a solution for that. I've actually put a lot of thought into this, and actually, to Alex's point, I'm playing with fountain pens. Just there is something about the tactile aspect of note taking. Problem is you don't necessarily have it with you all the time, right? And the problem is actually keeping track of everything. That it's not searchable, like you said. So I personally have a system where I just keep linear notes. I keep one notepad. I start on the left side. I just keep notes. I just keep going linear. And then on the back side, if it's an important note, I just log it. So I have an index on my other side, and I can literally go through and search my notes for important thoughts. So my personal system, but like I said, when you have information streams coming in from so many different sources coupled with an ADD brain, right? It's a hard thing to keep track of so many different thoughts, but a combination of just notes. This is good. The phone is good for, just quick thoughts. But what happens when you have, more words and you want to be able to write them down quickly? I guess you can do voice to text, which I do sometimes, but something about and I would just recommend this, pick up a pen, write it on paper, do it as an exercise. There's something about the human brain that was meant to actually write things down. So
good. Mitchell?
I'm with Alan. I think that makes sense. I mean, I do a lot of work, reading copy. So there's always some scrap paper that I can recycle. And the filing system, I agree with Alan. If it's important, you remember it. If you just need to reference a website or a phone number or something else, I'll just grab the paper that's there and I'll say, oh, yeah, that's the phone number. That's the website. And it works well. I know it's not efficient and it's not the best way to do it, but it works for my old adult brain.
Next question.
Next question in from David Kaufman in Vancouver, British Columbia. Do you think that the Apple Vision Pro will have user-installed diopter inserts for people who wear glasses, or will they have an optician in the store to fit them?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, when I saw this, they do have custom diopters that are, when you purchase them, you choose the diopter, they will choose the diopter that you need for your eyesight. Maybe you can bring in your prescription from your optometrist to do this, or maybe they'll have an optometrist-trained Genius Bar member that will do this for you, or a salesperson. But this, I think, is one of the problems with the design, because this Vision Pro then makes it a singular person. It's tied to one person. And you can't, if you're paying $3,500 for something and you have a family, your family may want to share in that. But if it has prescription lenses for one person and you cannot wear it with glasses because it can't do the eye tracking through your glasses. And this may be the problem of why it has to have these precision diopters that you have to purchase and insert, or not purchase, but at least obtain individual diopters for each eye and have them inserted when you buy the thing. Because then I think it probably has to be calibrated. Maybe it affects the eye tracking and it has to be calibrated then for the eye tracking for that particular set of diopters. That means you can't, here, look at this. You can't do that if anyone has any type of prescription, anything other than 20/20 normal vision. So if they can't come up with some way to do an adjustable diopter by the time the thing is released, I think that could be a major hindrance in sales, especially to families.
I think they'll probably sell as many as they can make. Go ahead, Bill.
There is actually a guest mode that disables some of this. I think it's going to work like this. If you're buying it for a particular use, let's say that you have something that you do every day and you need to be in that virtual world, you can customize this with the diopters that were mentioned. They're lenses that insert. They have a place for them in the machine. But if you get a stock one, I think there's some adjustability. And then a guest mode allows somebody to use other than your settings. So I know that's built into the operating system the way it is. And that's also how they're going to be able to do it for the people who going into the Apple stores, get an appointment and want to try it out. The Apple Genius Bar people or whomever will set you up so that you have the best possible experience and take a look at whether or not it works for you and the tasks you have for it.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael here with a question. I like the design of the MarkerTech trailers. Are there any competitors with trailers of a similar design?
I mean, there's other people that make trailers. You know, like it's not the only. These aren't the only trailers you can get. I will show you a couple of things that kind of. I used to own one, so this is what it used to look like before we had one. So we would have we would rent a U-Haul truck and or a van, and we just put a bunch of gear in the back. And that worked for a little while, but as we started to grow up, this is what ours looked like. So this is the Marketech trailer that you're talking about here. Now we made a lot of adjustments to it. So there's a couple things that the raw version doesn't have. So we added all that speed rail. So the speed rail that goes around that doesn't come with the trailer. The trailer is on its own here. So and the advantage of all the speed rail is we could get up to it. That didn't exist before. Also, we had extra speed rail, and so we could, if we wanted to go over, let's say this is a walkway, and we want to get wires over here, we could actually extend this out. We just literally attach a speed rail to it, and run it out here, and then drop our cables over. So we had a lot of a lot of really interesting things that we could do with that top area. We tied a lot of things to it, and so on and so forth. So that was the exterior. And then this is what it looked like inside, and we really packed it. So this is a Nat Geo thing that we did. But one of the things we did is we added all of these monitors to the side. And usually we were talking about this the other day. This is how we would manage the audio, the video. So we would have this is one audio is in, one audio is out. So we're looking at the stream and looking at what we're ingesting in there, and we would have that for every feed, or sometimes we'd have extra things for the clients. And we packed about, you'd be surprised what we could pack in here. Here's a kind of a lighter shot of this. And here you can see what we're looking at here are the scopes, and it tells us if this is all purple that we're running too low. So, and what you want to see is kind of this. But we added all these monitors to the sides. We also ripped out all their tables and we went to Ikea and got these bigger tables. That gave us a lot more space to work with. I think I have there's a wider shot of it. So you can kind of see that we had these two tables here and then these front tables here. We added this whiteboard to it. We had a little area you could sit in the back. And then we added a 100 amp 3-phase power supply to it and some big, so we beefed it up a fair bit more than what was there. We did look a lot before we found it. We didn't find anything else that was better. And then again, with our adjustments, we felt like it was probably one of the better ones that were out there. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, here's the thing about something that do yourself versus a commercial product. Typically in commercial products, they design it year one, and then they get feedback from their customers. They make changes and they make changes and they make changes. So the product evolves over the course of its first few years of selling. And I've always found that to be a real boon when you're looking for something, as opposed to, I'm going to do this for the first time and I'm going to make it the way I want, but I'm not getting that iterative process to make it better. And there's always, when you design something the first time, you look back and you go, oh, there's a flaw. I would have done that differently if I'd known then what I know now. So I'm a great believer that if you're looking for that kind of thing, a commercial solution that is proven over time, like Marketech building trailers, which they've done for 25 years, will get you more of those hidden things solved correctly than trying to do it yourself. My philosophy anyway.
And they get to interact with clients like us. So
exactly.
Marketech came by, they saw the trailer and they came by at NAB because we used this trailer for a 360 shoot for Nokia in 2016. And Marketech came by and they saw the trailer, and suddenly a whole bunch of people from Marketech came by and started taking pictures of our trailer, looking in and out, because what they gave us was a good skeleton, and then we had retrofitted it to make it probably twice the trailer of what came without a lot of expense. What is nice is that they do have a lot of the power stuff handled. They have the racking that's available on that. So that made things a lot easier, but we then adjusted it pretty dramatically to get it to what we want. But it was a good skeleton, and again, I haven't seen anything. I wouldn't want to start with a raw trailer. That would be a nightmare. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Alex, if you don't mind, I'm curious about some details about it. So you said it had the racking. Looking in your control room, when you're sitting in your control room, were you looking to the front of the trailer or the back of the trailer?
So you're looking at the front. So you're looking at the back of the trailer here. So there's a racks. There are racks here that we attached monitors in front of a lot of the racks, but there's racks all here. and there's a table here, and there's some more racks down here. So that's where the racks were, and that's the back of the trailer. There's actually another.
So when you open up the back door, you have access to all the patching.
Yeah, there's actually another 4 feet, I think, 4 or 5 feet behind this. That is, we could actually put an audio. Oftentimes, the audio engineer would sit in there. So there's another place. There's another station that I don't have a picture of easily.
In between those monitors and the racks.
In between these monitors and the back door, there's like a whole little cavity back there.
Gotcha.
So you have in the back behind these racks, you have access to all the wiring, but you also could put a whole nother. I think it's probably closer to 6 feet behind it that's back there. That you can, so you have access to all these racks. We had power in the back over here, so we could, and there's a little mouse hole to the side of there, so we could literally run the shore power, the 100 amp 3-phase or whatever into it, and then oftentimes we'd redistribute it to everybody else because that way we could control it. And then, but then there's also another behind the rack. There's another table back here, and oftentimes you put an audio engineer back there instead.
So if those racks are bifurcating, just a note to the panel. It's the first time Chris Vanix ever said that word out loud. Bifurcating. if those racks are cutting the compartment in half, or not in half, but dividing it.
Yeah,
understood. How do you get at the front of those racks? Because I'm thinking like you put a what is it? Shuttle. You put a recorder in there. You got to touch the front of it, but you have to patch the back of it.
Well, what we would do is we would, if you looked at it, all of our recorders are right here. And there's a desk right here, so people are sitting there and they just reach out and touch.
Okay.
So we would. It's where you put them. And here's other recorders. So we found that putting these big 55-inch monitors up there, that's what the TD liked. It's what Nate liked. so Nate would use this thing and just say, well, I like this and I like this and I like this, and we would keep on taking notes, and then we would come back and try to.
So when you bought it raw, it had the racks, it had some tables. You replaced most of the tables.
We replaced the front table. We left because it was kind of part of the racks, but the two back tables we took out because they were too small. And so they just didn't go as long. They created more egress. I'm sure they created a legal amount of egress down the side, but the problem is it didn't give us a lot of table space, and we felt like it was more than we needed. So we went to Ikea and bought. I don't think we got exactly the right length, but what we did is, when you have guys from the ILM model shop that are friends of yours, you just hand them some raw tables and say, I want this to go in here. And then we said, oh, there's a little area in the back. You can kind of see it here. There's right down here in this little corner, you'll see that's a seat. And it actually had little compartments underneath that we could hide food and all kinds of other stuff in it. But people could sit back there too. So, and we built that custom for it. And then again, those are the kind of things that Mark took. I don't know if they ever did anything with it, but they definitely took a lot of photos of what we did. And we made it a much more usable. And we use this trailer probably once a week.
Yeah, I find truck design to be super fascinating. There was a guy in the San Francisco Bay Area named Skip Long who designed probably the most premier truck of the 80s. And it was interesting because what he did doing sports is he went to all of the best TDs, the best Chiron operators, the best tape ops, and he just grilled them. What do you need? What's wrong in the other trucks? And he built a truck that was like the #1 truck in Northern California for a decade. It was great.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. Is you talk to people who, you don't try to think about it. You don't take notes looking at it. You go to the people who are using it and ask them questions. And the best thing to do is to build them, like if you're going to build a bunch of them, is build them iteratively. Build one and have people use it and complain about it, and then build it again, and then figure it out. So this is just a tiny little trailer. I always knew that we were the cute little trailer compared to the trucks that we did rent when we needed to do bigger events. But it was good. The one thing that we had, that it was self-contained UPS, so that it was a relatively light trailer. It could run basic shows really, really well, and you could lose power, which we couldn't do with the big truck. The big truck needed a cat outside cat generator outside to keep it going. Next question.
Next one in from Dave Kaufman in Vancouver, British Columbia. How can we as viewers support the writers and actors strikes?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, that's a tough one. I guess you could support them on social media with, stirring messages. I would not boycott streaming of any of the majors, because then that just reinforces their excuse that, hey, we're not making enough money on streaming. See, and that just makes it even worse for the negotiations. The sad thing is that the actors and a lot of the writers as well, they're negotiating for these contract wages, and they're upgrading the wages, somewhat every year, but it's not keeping up with the rate of inflation. So it effectively is a rate reduction in the new contract. And the problem is with residuals, the ability to calculate the amount of residuals based on the amount of return or profit from a particular show is gotten difficult with streaming, because they're not willing to share the metrics of how much of their streaming income is attributed to what device, what particular shows. So until they agree on a way to do all of that, it's going to be kind of up in the air. So I don't know if, other than just moral support, I don't know of any way to offer your support to the actors. I think a good thing to know is, as you can state, is that only about 5% of those 160,000 actors, performers that are on strike there, earn a living from that profession without a second job or a third job. So only a very small percentage, about 5%, can actually earn a living at the current wage structure that's there.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I would say vote with your wallet. I mean, that's the only way you're going to get the attention of the big streamers out there. And if they slack off their programming because the strike is affecting them, they're going to feel it. They're going to feel it on their bottom line. That's going to force them to do something.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I don't think there's anything that we can do individually that's going to make any difference. This is a pretty complicated and messy thing. I don't think there's anything that we would do. I think that it may last a very long time. I'm going to guess that I'd say it's 50-50 chance it'll go into 2024. It's a pretty important set of agreements that have to be made there. And the hard part is that in the past, you had television and film companies really pushing for folks to make a deal, because they were like, hey, we've got to release the fall schedule. The streamers, can sit on their back catalog for a long time. And so I think that's going to be the big challenge. Next question.
Next question from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California. Is there a quality difference between AJA and Blackmagic converters?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
That's a tough question. I mean, you could put them on a scope or check their specs. But for the converters, I'm not necessarily talking about the bigger stuff that they all make. I somehow feel the AJA devices are a little more solid and a little more reliable, just because I have more experience with them.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I think the Decimator products, which isn't one of the two you mentioned, are a lot more versatile than either of those two, because they handle variable frame rate and a whole bunch of different flavors of HD and SD and HD, SDI and HDR, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're a little more versatile.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, we've had trouble. I've had many of both, and I have the Blackmagic ones are generally more cost effective. Generally, the build quality on the AJAs is a little higher in some cases, but a lot of the Blackmagic stuff has come up to speed really fast. We've had probably an equal number of issues with both. So I don't think that and I will admit, just from a cost perspective, I probably had a lot more Blackmagic hardware. So it's hard to say. But the thing you have to look at is there are things that you can and can't do with the different converters. And so you have to also, figure that out as well. Next question.
Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. The Zato by Atomos was mentioned. Are there other hardware switching devices that take USB video natively?
Yeah, so this is the Zato that I haven't tested yet, but I'm figuring out right now. And this is a little monitor that will stream. I didn't know that it would actually switch. I think, it does. It does picture in picture. So if you have an HDMI input and a little webcam, you can actually go picture in picture with this little guy. And I think you might be able to cut between them too. So I'm going to figure that out too. But again, I'm just getting my head around it. But the build quality is much higher than I expected, to be honest with you, for the cost. And so it's plastic, but it's also again, it's pretty slick little device. So I bought it because someone else was talking about it, and I figured, well, I'll buy it and I'll send it back if I don't like it. But I don't know if this is going to go home.
What was the cost, Alex?
I think it was $299. So for a little monitor that's $299 that also streams, that also does conversion, my big thing is I'll probably send it back if I can't get UVC control from the computer to the webcam. It's not useful to me if I can't get both of those things to work. So anyway, well, that's the part. If that'll work, I'm gonna keep it. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Do you think they're chasing the what is it? The yellow box, the little yellow device?
I don't think Atomos is chasing yellow box. I don't think. Or yellow. Yeah, I don't think that they're chasing anything. I think they're just making things that they think will serve the market. I think that they're kind of not. If Atomos is chasing anything, it's probably they're former Blackmagic folks, so they're probably aiming at Blackmagic more than anything else. But they're adding their own feature set. They definitely have their own way of doing things and what they think is important, which is great for us. Next question.
Next one in from Peter Belbin in Houston, Texas. Is there anecdotal support for the idea that a video converter and interface that runs hot tends to not last as long as those that operate at a lower temperature? Any stories regarding hot running equipment failing?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I haven't seen that. I've been using the Decimator product, which have this cast aluminum case, which is a great way to dissipate heat. And they have heat sinks built into them that are flush with the back of the case. So if you don't want to stack a bunch of them up and set them on top of each other, you want some airflow around them anyway. And I don't have any stories. The only thing, some of these, not the Melees, but some of the stick PCs I've run into problems with. When they get hot, they throttle down. So that might be a problem. I haven't had anything get so hot as to where the surface mounted chips fall off or anything like that, but I doubt they will ever get that hot, because if they're doing that, they're dissipating so much heat, they'd be dragging your power supply down. The power supply wouldn't be able to provide enough current to get them that hot.
Go, Bill.
I wonder if that's a reflection back to the old days with literally the wiring of transistors and diodes and resistors and things like that to boards. We used to often open up something that wasn't working and find next to the little wire traces a resistor with a brown circle around it that obviously had overheated and kind of let out the gas of life, so to speak. I haven't seen much of that happening in the new system on a chip era where everything is kind of pre-built packages and you don't get those discrete components anymore. So I'm not sure. I like the fact that things don't run hot, and I worry when they do run hot, but I think that's probably a leftover from that era when you could burn devices up pretty easy.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen, we feel like that the moisture, like so humid temperatures as well as heat, definitely shorten the life of the equipment that we use. And that's why our riders are pretty specific about that we expect the room to be 75 degrees or lower, or an ability to manage that, or we oftentimes won't build into it. Next question.
Next one in from Douglas Carmichael. Alex, how well did the Ikea tables hold up on the road?
Yeah, these are the tables that he's talking about here. So these are the Ikea. All we got were tabletops. So you can buy tabletops in Ikea. And we got those tabletops, and then we put them back onto the pieces that fit into the old tables we're on. So we didn't really we were not using the Ikea legs, and they worked perfectly. There was never any issue with the tables. Next question.
From Alan Hawks in Houston, Texas, and here in our panel, what do you recommend for lighting setup for these broadcasts? Mitchell's lighting setup in particular looks great. Any suggestions?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I started out with a good camera, an FX3, and I started out with a decent key light, but the community basically helped me get everything. Every light in here actually came from a suggestion from Sunny, whether it's the Nan light that I have over here that's doing the filling, or the hair light, be that as it may, or the blue splash that's happening over there is from Chris Fenwick. It's a group effort. So if you participate, there's a good chance you're going to get a lot of good advice, and that will improve the quality.
Go, Bill.
Yeah, it's never been easier to find because there's so much LED lighting nowadays that is decent. I mean, not fabulous, but decent. And you can get down into some of the stuff on eBay that's, $9 a light or something like that. And that stuff can fail pretty easily. even if it's something with an LED light source or a chip light source. But most of the things now coming out of the Pacific Rim in terms of low-cost lighting is pretty decent. So anything that makes light, if you learn to shape it well and learn to control it, can now be an asset. So you don't have to spend a ton as we used to have to.
Go ahead, Chris.
I just wanted to mention about lighting. I literally just today, so I've completely modified my lighting. Hopefully it looks roughly the same, because I was able to get rid of this big giant flag that I was using to minimize the amount of blue over here. And I did it with this $25 purchase. And so I'm not using a NAND light, although this is for the NAND light. I'm actually using the Elgato key lights, which are fairly popular. I know some people here use them. But this $25 thing, it Velcros around the front of the thing, and it the light fixture. It, if you don't know, it's an egg crate thing. It kind of snoots it down in a interesting way without being big and bulky. And now I have a lot more room for activities and crazy arm gestures over this direction. So you may see me answering questions where I do this a lot more because I can. But anyway, I got rid of a huge flag, $25, works great on the Elgatos.
And for me, I mostly look at a larger source. I think I've shown this before, but this is my view of the show. And what you saw here is I used I used MakerPipe. So these are relatively inexpensive little MakerPipe makes these, and then this is just EMT rail, and so all of this whole grid is all made from EMT rail and this MakerPipe, these MakerPipe connections. And so this is about a 5 foot by 3 foot piece. That's there, and then I just hung some diffusion. I think that was like $15. I think this whole thing cost about $30 or something in pieces. But there are 3 NAND lights back behind it that are pulled away a little bit so that they just kind of are softly hitting that. And so that's now this is all white, so there's a little bit of bounce there. This is the hair light that's attached to the rig that's attached to the grid that I built. Again, and then there's in the corners I've got C-stands that hold this whole thing up. And so I can move, if I want to, I can move that whole rig up and down. So I can, with the C-stands, I can move them up and down. So I want to work on it. I bring it down, do some work on it, and then I put it back up again. It's not high. It's not too high, so I can do most of it on my own, but I can bring it down if I need to.
Interesting, Alex. That photo that you showed looks very much like the bridge of the Millennium Falcon.
Well, so when we had our guests on last week, I think I mentioned that I wanted to look like the Enterprise. I do have an idea of like cleaning this up, like I like the look of it. And so I've been thinking about really building this out so that this is all sound panels, like I want to make it all sound panels with a rig down here, and then really build these monitors up. And so it'll look even more like the Millennium Falcon than it does right now. So yeah, it does look close. I didn't, I have to admit, I
that was the first thing I thought of when I saw that picture. I was like, oh, that's the Millennium Falcon.
I think I could add, if I added those windows, and then I have to have monitors behind it so that I can do the whole jump to hyperspace. I think that would be perfect. I don't know why I wasn't, why I hadn't thought of that already. Anyway, just a quick reminder that we've got a lot of great stuff coming up this week. On tomorrow, we're going to talk about high-end interfaces. And so we're going to look at the Antelope Galaxy 64 Synergy Core and the ATEM microphone converter. So stay tuned for that. Thursday, Jeffrey Orthwine and Andy Sullivan. We had them on maybe a year ago, getting ready for shooting their movie. So they were shooting a film about vampires, there was some prep, and Jeffrey kind of walked us through the prep, and now they've shot it. They've been doing post, and so they're going to be coming back and hanging out with us and talking a little bit about it. On Friday, we're going to talk about loading in, loading out. It may seem like a simple problem. You got to get our group. Is able to talk about gaff tape for an hour. So we're going to talk about loading in and loading out.
And have often.
We have. Yeah, exactly. So we're going to be talking really about how to get in and out of buildings. It is more complicated than it seems. And we'll talk about some of the techniques to make sure that that is as smooth as possible. So stay tuned for that. And then Saturday, we have disability inclusion in employment. And you really want to check out the Saturdays. The Saturdays have become this really interesting, collection of folks that are, we have deaf panelists, we have ASL going on, as well as great conversations. And I think we're really pushing a new envelope of that process. And so it's definitely worth checking out. Also remember that what we used to call the reader workshop is happening today at noon Pacific Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that's a great way if you want to practice being a panelist, being a host, being a reader, you can get on there and kind of get your practice a little bit. Sundays are also a great day to practice. So you can come on and just jump on and be part of the panel there as well. So definitely try to check that out. And we're now jumping into the second hour and talking about generative AI in Photoshop specifically, because it's got kind of a cool setup there that I thought that it would be worth at least giving people a preview. Without your questions, I don't know how long we'll talk about this, but I really felt like it was worth, having the discussions, people know it's there and know what it does. I think that, as we move towards it, of course, we've had generative AI discussions in the past around Midjourney and Dolly and other things like that. But Photoshop is taking a different route, which is really allowing you to have a lot more control over how you do the generative AI. So Midjourney is a little bit of you tell Midjourney to do something and then you hope it does it. and what Photoshop does is allows you to start being a little bit more specific about what you're actually doing. And we'll show a couple examples of that. Mitch, do you want to, I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Is this the portion of the program where we show examples?
It sure is.
Okay, awesome. So this is a document that I have on my computer, and it's called John Preto Loves AI.psd. And it started with an empty canvas, and I started in Photoshop with literally a blank canvas, and I select all, and I said, sunset on the beach at night or evening. I guess sunset at night. That sounds weird. I can't remember the exact prompt. Actually, I could tell you the exact prompt, because if I click on this, it tells you beach at sunset. That's the prompt that I did. And when I did, it gave me this image. Now, I'm a little unclear. Y'all can answer for me. Is this an image that exists someplace, or is this drawing something
drawing
that looks
it from
like
scratch?
Really drawing from scratch? Really?
Yep.
Okay, so that's the first thing it did. And then I thought, well, let's do this. And this prompt is called School of Dolphins Swimming. And what I did is I selected a little portion of the image. I just drew a bounding box around it. And this is what it gave me. It just drew the School of Dolphins Swimming. All right, that was the next prompt. And then the next prompt was I wanted to put a seashell in. So I said, seashell in dark light. And I drew a little bounding box down here. And when I did that, it gave me this. Oh, look at that. Now, I will admit, I changed it to a pin light, and I pulled the opacity down a little bit so it looked even darker. A little bit of a hackery there. I'm sure there's smarter ways to do that if I knew what I was doing. Then the next prompt I did was single sailboat on the horizon at sunset. Okay, so I was realizing that if you get a little bit more detailed, it will do better. And this is what it gave me. And what's interesting is you could see around the sailboat as I turn it on and off, it's actually redrawing. Don't say oops on my show. It's redrawing the ocean. It's redrawing the sky. It's not just placing a silhouette on the water. Okay. Next prompt was I thought it'd be fun to make it bigger. So I said extension of beach at sunset. And at first I just went sideways. Okay. So I made it twice as wide or something like that. And then there was this little, you made fun of me last time I gave this demo, this gradu, this little thing in the corner over there. So I said, remove that. And it took that away. But that little bit of stuff over there inspired me, because I grew up in Southern California, and you can't go to the beach in Southern California without seeing an oil rig. So I added the prompt there was offshore oil rig at sunset on horizon, and then I made the thing white, I increased the foreground and I removed this little gradu down over there. The prompt for that was, I don't know what it was. It was remove gradu or something like that. So anyway, that allegedly is something that doesn't exist in real life that Photoshop allegedly drew from scratch.
Yeah, and it is especially for what I think is really interesting about. I've used some of the bits and pieces of it. What I think is really interesting is from a concept perspective of being able to throw together an idea. Maybe you're going to use it in the final version, maybe you're not. But being able to throw together an idea. Let me show you another one here. This is, let's see if I can. So if you look at this is just me hacking something out. So I go, okay, well, so this is just some basic colors in Photoshop again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this masking tool and I'm going to go up to fill. And I know my thing is on the other side, so I'm going to pull this over. So under edit, I opened up fill. And here, this is a little bit of a hack because we're in the beta. And so what I can do is go in and I say, I want to do a color. And I set this color randomly, black to 70%. So this is how programmers hack things when they don't have an interface. So anyway, so you put in 70%, I hit OK and hit OK here. And then I'm going to turn this mask so that now it opens up and wants to do a generative fill. And I can say, I want a river flowing past a cliff. And all I've had here is some roughed out direction here, and I hit generate, and it's going to kind of work on it. So this is, instead of just saying I want something here, I'm actually kind of blocking out what I want it to look like or where I want it to go. And so it's looking at that image. It's again, there's a little bit of a hack there. That in the selection. And again, that's just how a programmer goes, well, I don't have a button for that yet, but I'm just going to put that in, just put 70% in. There you go. So
my goodness.
Yeah. So that is like, when I saw that was like, and that's, again, there'll be a button for that at some point, but one of the programmers.
What would that button be called, Alex?
I don't know. It'll be like, I don't know, blocking or something. I don't know what the button will be called when it's done, but that was something that someone from Adobe put up on Twitter. Like I just saw it on Twitter and I was like, what the what? And
so I didn't know where you were going when you started that explanation. Could you explain that again?
Sure.
What was the 30%?
Now
that we know where you're going, we know.
Yeah, exactly. Let's back up again. So let's go back to this. So this is this I just drew with my paintbrush. And then what I did is I clicked on this little button here. So this is, so I click on that there. And then I go up to fill. I opened up fill and I go to color and I just type in 70. It has to be 70% as far as I know. Like this is a coder saying, if I see this, do the next thing. Like it's not like it's so you're not, there's no good reason for that. It's just that's where they put it, and they put it on Twitter like, hey, I did this thing. I hit okay. And then I turn that off and it says, okay, you want to generate a fill. And then I say, I want that to be a river flowing past a cliff. And then I hit generate. So, and if I, redrew this, I don't know if we have enough time. Maybe we have time, I'll do it again. But if I redrew it, the river going another direction, it'll just do another direction. Like it'll, and so when it comes to being able to, this is where this is going though. This is where this whole world is going to go when it comes to concepting ideas, building backgrounds. We're going to be able to see, and look, it came up with a completely different one, but it still has the cliff kind of where I had it here. It has the water. So it'll be different every time I do it. In fact, there's a couple different versions of it, right? So, but they're all following that basic, layout that I gave it, that's there. But they're just different versions of that piece there. And this is a preview to what's about to happen. And this is why I wanted to bring it up and show it is, and to talk about it. I'll show a couple other examples, but it is the idea. A lot of people worry about, the displacement of of workers, and people will be displaced. Every time you see a new technology, a bunch of people get displaced, and so that's something we have to kind of know that that's going to happen. But there's not a lot of tape ops anymore in the same way that there were, and there's not a lot of people who have to do. There's a whole lot of things that we don't do anymore. But what I will say is the possibility of people being able to be creative, that all these people who have ideas about the next movie they want to do or the next thing that they want to do, and they just need another background, they just need something else. The ability for them just to reach out and just create it is going to go through the roof. I mean, we're talking, this is still a infantile version of what's going to happen, of being able to block something out and it just kind of builds it, is going to be something that's pretty profound as far as people's ability to create that content. It also means that content itself may not be as valuable, and that's why we have strikes and stuff like that, because no one knows how much it's going to be worth in 10 years because the content may be near worthless, because of the hyperinflation that's going to be created by people being able to create at will. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I am gobsmacked by what you're showing me. To be honest with you, I haven't had a lot of time to play with it. And I know a workflow in Photoshop because I've been using it for 30 or 40 years. This completely revolutionizes everything you do. And you can do it in layers, and you can add it, and you can subtract it, and you can experiment. And that's the one thing that's interesting about major steps in digital technology is now you have the time to experiment with things until you get it exactly where you want. Because usually in the past, you'd work hard on a solution like to do that river, matching it to some stock footage. It might have taken me a half an hour to get it there. You did it in 2 minutes? So that's the sea change.
And that's if you had the skill too. I mean, remember that this is going to be something that everyone's going to have, and it's not going to be, and again, when you want something specific, when you're doing visual effects, I see this taking a little bit longer. Now, if you just need a background, then maybe that's going to be enough. But I still think that there's going to be a lot of times when you need to have that high-end skill to really make this work perfectly. So I don't think this is a replacement for high-end artists. But being able to mock something out like that and just say, well, then there's a river, and then I could go, because this is now, something that I can work with. I can say, okay, I want to, let's go ahead. I'll let Alan talk while I figure something out.
It's all good. I'm just looking at this again. I was actually a photographic retoucher back in the day. That's what I did for many, many years. It's how I made my living. And I'm looking at this now. I don't really do it much anymore, but I'm looking at the implications of what I'm seeing. I played around with Photoshop along the lines of what Alex just showed and what Chris was doing. And I don't know if people, it's still hard for me to process what I'm looking at. To call this a disruptive technology is a massive understatement. And I'm thinking, I love it and I hate it, right? What do I love about it? I love about it, if I think about it from an entrepreneurial perspective, if I think about it from a director perspective, I love it. But if I think about it from an artist perspective, there's things that I actually hate about it. Because I'll tell you, there's an entire generation of retouchers out there who base their livelihood on what they're doing, and their entire portfolio has just been trivialized, right? It's like, oh, did AI do that? No, I put blood, sweat, and tears into trying to figure out how to do this for a living, right? So it's kind of has some pretty serious psychological implications. But as a creator, I think, I'm always trying to create more than I have a budget or means for. And when I think of it from that aspect, it's like, wow, this is an insanely powerful tool. I'm using generative AI all the time. I'm using ChatGPT now all the time. It's just become a part of my tool set, right? Yeah.
But I think that's in many things that's where it comes down to. We're going to try to bring a friend of mine on named Paul Houston, who pretty much worked at ILM from almost day one. And you'll see pictures of him in Light and Magic. I'll see, there's Paul. And he's working on physical models, right? So he was in the model shop. He's working on physical models, and he's painting them and everything else. When I met him, he was in the digital mat. So he had gone from models to digital mat. And so he was taking the skills that he had in models and now applying it to digital. So a lot of people in the model shop didn't end up, only the very best stuck around because the model shop got smaller. And he moved to digital mat. the last time I had coffee with him, maybe a year ago or so, he's doing Unreal Engine. Like he's taken all the stuff that he knows and he's applying it to real-time 3D, and he's been, again, he started in the 70s doing models, and he just keeps moving with the technology forward. And I think that as artists, we really have to think about, we cannot rely on the killer is relying on the skill that you had before, that you have to be looking at in our industry and in the world coming up in general. You have to look at where you are as a stepping stone to the next thing. And you have to keep on, one of the reasons we do this every day is to keep on looking at the next thing. What is the next, and that's why we're doing this, is that let's look at the next thing. Let's think about how we can take advantage of it now, as opposed to, trying to hang on to the past. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think we've seen this in our industry many times. And one of the things I like about getting a little older and experiencing a little bit more is you see the fractals, you see the repetition. I remember when I used to work on the Computer Chronicles show, when Adobe came and showed layer effects for the first time in Photoshop, like just one click drop shadow, adjust the opacity, adjust how broad it was. I don't remember, being blown away. It's like, oh my goodness, that just took away 12 clicks I used to do.
Right.
And that's okay. Things change. I was explaining to my wife, because of my black magic doesn't like being on for more than 2 years in a row, constantly. I now have to unplug it at night. I just yank the power and then I just plug it back in. I explained to my wife, I go, that turning on of the camera, that used to take engineers, 2 grown adults, 2 engineers, well-trained, 30 minutes per camera when I used to work at KQED eons ago.
Yeah.
So if we had a 4-camera cooking show, the engineers had to show up 2 hours before anybody else just so the cameras would be on when we got there.
Right.
And yes, things change, and it's okay. It's okay, but if you are comfortable living in the bell curve of your industry, just being that, that guy in the middle who just shows up and turns on the prompter, you're in trouble. That's why you want to be somebody like Courtney, who invents the prompter and then invents all the little boxes that make it work better. So you have to be in that top crust, that top, 2 or 3%, and you'll be okay, like your model shop friend.
And the one thing that I will say is that the thing that doesn't change is the development of your eye on taking a look. Like what I've worked with Alan for a long time, and what Alan brings is an eye that is better than mine. That I know that he's going to be worried about things that I'm not worried about. When you look at an Apple ad, when you look at a lot of things, a lot of the graphics that you see are not hard to make. Like Apple doesn't do things that are really hard. It just takes taste. It just requires a lot of taste to get it just right and to get the flow just right. It's not about the motion curves. It's not about, it's understanding. And, a lot of people will put things together, and someone who's really got taste will sit there and go, this doesn't feel quite right. And I'll be honest, when we say that visual effects, one of the reasons people hate CG or whatever is because they're like, oh, that film didn't use any CG. What that film didn't use any CG, what that means is we spent the time and money to get the physics right. And we spent the time and money to get the comps right, in the digital effects that we added, because there were digital effects all through it. And there's all these other things, but we didn't do it cheaply. Or we didn't do it. We might have spent a lot of money on a film, but we got the physics correct. If you look at an Avatar, they spent the money that was required to get every little thing right. So it felt, even though it was all CG, it felt real. Tenet has lots of digital effects, but then there's ones that don't quite get over that. But that's an eye, that's taste, that is something there. And so it's not, and so AI isn't going to fix that. It fix it a little bit. I will say that AI has a lot of taste because it's looking at other people's good taste. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, there's a lot of lawsuits about that right now. I think it's a development of a tool. And I think generative AI is a tool, but it's kind of like the transition from stone tools to hand tools, and then in the later to lithium battery powered power tools. The tools let you do things a lot quicker than you used to be able to with that stone axe. But now you have you can do things a lot faster. You're creating the same things, but your tools are a lot better. And if you look at it that, you can accept it. I think there's certain things, certain areas that are going to disappear. Art directors or production designers used to have style books, used to go into their offices and they'd have whole library of style books, which they would look through and look for a style of architecture, a style of room, or style of furniture that they want to feature in a film or a television show. And I think the creativity, that's the new thing. That's the thing about AI that didn't exist in the past. Because the less information you give it, the more creative it gets. So things like writer's block may be a thing in the past. With generative AI, if you get stuck on something, you just say, where would you go from here? Let ChatGPT come up with give me 4 different scenarios for this storyline to continue, and it can do that. And the same thing with generative graphics AI. If you're looking for a style or a look, when I look at some of the Midjourney photos that are in the community showcase, you see a lot of them that say, Pixar style, cute little girl, etc. So that when an animation company Disney is trying to come up with a new character to feature, their next mega show on, they can generate a whole lot of choices in the style that is theirs without any cost or in hiring any of their character designers to brainstorm on. They can choose one and then hand it over to the animators to go to town. And soon, I guess, the ability to actually animate it will be handled by AI, but that's still a step away. So we're moving in that direction. So it's going to displace a number of people, mostly the highly creative people first, and then the workers.
And I just want to say that one of the reasons we see so much about it right now is because it's happening to white collar workers instead of blue collar workers. When the factories replaced all the blue collar workers with machines, we were like, well, that's progress and they're just going to have to figure it out. And but now that it's like white collar workers, everyone's like, now no one's safe, so that's part of what we're seeing a little bit of. Let me show you a little bit before we go to the next comment. So what I did is here's the image that we created there, but remember that we can keep on adding layers. So I can say, hey, I want add, let's see here. We want to vote two people in a rowboat. I haven't tried this, so we'll see how this goes. Generate. So now it's going to take that little section. So it's not just that you can lay that out. You can do the basic layout of what you're doing. But then you can start adding, other details, to the process here.
Add an oil rig.
Well, what if you do something stupid?
So there's people. Now I said 2, and let's see if there's 3. Okay, there's 2. So there's 2 there, and it kind of faded it in. Maybe it's maybe I might need to do a little bit more work with that. But I could take. Let's see. Chris said.
I was kidding, by the way.
Well, what if you do something stupid and you draw an area in the trees and say add 2 people in a rowboat? What is it? Does it?
It'll just put 2 people in the rowboat
in the trees.
Yeah, okay. Totally. Right. It'll add 2 people. But again, so when you watch this, you want to think about the idea that that someone is. If there's your little oil rig that's there now, and then you could have here, man climbing cliff. And so the thing is that and it's got little shadows and stuff like that. The thing you want to look at, by the way, the scale is important. Like if I make that square bigger, it will make the guy bigger. So it'll fill that. It'll try to fill that square. So there's
also,
a guy.
Also point out that it gives you multiple versions of the oil rig that you can select between.
Right. Yeah. So there's the guy climbing there. He might be a little big. I could have made it bigger there. So let's see if I have. See, this is the oil rig. I could have had it like this. I could have had it like this. I could have had it like this. But if I was, this guy's huge, by the way. Anyway, so, but if you start to work on it, you can imagine a art director again, or someone who's trying to come up with something, a pitch deck, images or whatever, I don't know if I would use this in a commercial project yet. But what I will say is that it is something that, I just want to show you what I'm trying to figure as a director, as a DP, as someone who can't draw or can't use Photoshop, the ability to kind of sketch something out, get the overall view, start adding bits and pieces into it, and then hand it to a concept artist and say, it's so much easier than trying to describe it all, and being able to do that. And that is going to keep getting better and better. Go ahead, Bill.
So for me, it was interesting when Courtney was talking about that, it caused the words "in the style of" to come to me, because in the first times that I was exploring that, and we were exploring this on the show, it was in the style of Rembrandt or the style of Salvador Dali or something like that. You can understand how you're reducing the large language model to something that it can act on and give you something that's closer to what you're looking for. But I immediately went to the thought of, okay, let's imagine there's a new hot graphic designer or something like that, Jane Crazy, and Jane Crazy has a style, so she starts getting a little viral, and then people start saying, I want this in the style of Jane Crazy. Well, how much does that affect Jane Crazy's ability to capitalize on that brain generative style decision that she made? Or will it diffuse out among the artistic community so rapidly that agencies start doing their own Jane Crazy stuff, and Jane Crazy's original content gets diffused as fast as these models diffuse it? To me, that's the more important thing, as to whether or not there's still robust reason to be a leading edge creative and do something that hasn't been done before, where you can focus these models on everybody suddenly being able to do what you've generated. That's interesting to me.
As a person who worked in visual effects, though, I mean, what I will say is that we didn't have any copyrights. We don't have any residuals. We have what we did the last show, and when we figured it out, usually everybody figured it out, pretty quickly. Like, as soon as you do a shot at ILM and those people go work at Digital Domain, all those ideas go to Digital Domain and Weta and all these other things, and the techniques of how it was used, and the artists that are I'll say in visual effects, the artists that are the best. I was having lunch with someone over the weekend in LA, that we were talking about there was this moment in 1990, I think it was 1995. Mission Impossible was coming out. I don't even know if Mission Impossible had come out yet. And there was a shot with British Airways at the very end. And I was watching Mission Impossible because I wanted to see it before I saw the movie. I watched all of them last week. And the very first one, I pointed to that shot to my wife and I said, that shot changed visual effects forever. That one shot. And she was like, well, how did it do that? Well, because John Knoll, they didn't like the shot that they had. They needed an establishing shot. And John said, I can do that. And he downloaded a cheap model of a 737 and then textured it really well. And then he rendered it in passes. Now, those of us who do computer graphics don't think about rendering in passes, but none of us had ever heard of that before. Like, this was 1994, 1995. No one had ever thought of rendering in passes. It's because John came from a visual effects firm that, ILM, that did passes for miniatures. So he's like, I'll just do passes like I would do miniatures, like we do with the motion control arm. And so he showed us that you could have a specular pass and a diffuse pass and a reflective pass and the window pass and all these other things. And he walked us through it piece by piece by piece by piece by piece, and showed us exactly how he did it at this infamous dinner with Electric Image. There's this get together for Electric Image, the summit. And but all of us were all the people who do visual effects, for a lot of TV stuff. And it literally changed the industry overnight. Like, all of us suddenly just were obsessed with, when I did the Queen ship a couple of years later, it was 22 passes of different surfaces and everything else to make it work. And it allowed us to adjust all those things. Did that negatively affect John Knoll? Not really. And part of that is because John Knoll just keeps moving. Like he just keeps rolling down the path and absorbing more information. And that's what we have to think about as an artist. It's not going to be about the last thing we created. It's going to be about the next thing that we create. And you're going to have to keep moving, because even with artists, when someone did an impressionism, a bunch of people saw it and then they all started doing impressionism. And if you look at art, a lot of art, whether the machine's replacing you or not, as soon as you put it out there, people are going to look at what you did. And if they like it, they're going to start reproducing it, and so it's very hard for you to copyright an idea. Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. This stuff's been keeping me up at night for a while. I've been a bit, say, gobsmacked. I think we're going to look back on this 10 years from now and realize that this is one of the most explosive, disruptive technologies that's existed. And I'm looking at everything at face value right now, but not just what's happening right now, but where this is going. It has so many implications everywhere. My mind is just thinking, this is, pretty soon you're going to see generative prompts in 3D, generative prompts basically everywhere. You're going to see generative prompts. And what does that mean? What am I supposed to do with it? Alex touched to the point where, it still takes this eye, the eye. You can't replace the eye. If you get new artists coming in, and it takes a while to develop the eye to be able to look things deeper. But to be honest with you, I'm looking at what's coming out from Midjourney, and you can tell Midjourney your dog is ugly, and it'll render a beautifully rendered image of an ugly dog. I mean, it's insane how good of an eye it actually has. And I'm thinking, how does it do this? And what I'm realizing now is one of the main shortcomings is it's not micro directable. If you have if you're willing to take whatever it is at face value, it's pretty amazing. But if you have a specific vision of what you want to create, it's very hard to get it there.
And it'll get better. I mean, like for instance, this is something that I like to make. I make a lot of screens for my thing, but this was generated by Midjourney. So I just said I wanted I don't know, pipes for circuits and stuff like that.
Steampunk iPhone background.
Yeah, steampunk iPhone. And so then, but I can select this and go, well, what I really want underneath something is, I'll grab that and say I want a black LED screen there.
You typed MED.
Yeah, LED. Black screen. See what it generates here. So this is where you take Midjourney and then you start. I don't know what it's going to do here, but I've done it in the past. It's different every time, so it's kind of like a box of chocolates. Anyway, so but I think that so here put it kind of embedded a screen. I can put another screen in here, so it'll do different. But there's one that kind of fits into that. So I can start taking my Midjourney stuff and start adding. And what's cool about it is that the Photoshop is going to take the surrounding areas and kind of blend it in. Is it perfect yet? No, but if I do a bunch of them, I can keep on making it better. And so the point is that you do have more explicit control. And as a concept or something that I'm playing with, the amount of time, Alan can tell you, like, how long would it take to do this background? Like to do what I just did there, that took 20 seconds in Midjourney, and then another 20 seconds in Photoshop for a concept. That's weeks. Like to get that quality, it would be weeks of modeling and texturing and rendering to get that kind of quality. And again, I might hire someone now, hand this to Alan and go, now make this, I need this very specific and everything else. But he's got a really good idea of the feel that I want. And I might just use it. It just depends on how.
Alex, is that adding ambient occlusion and shadows and lighting effects?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I want to echo what Alan was saying. The micro adjustability is clearly an issue. It may get better. But back to the thing about the in the style of, I think that, and we've talked about this before, copying a style or being inspired by a style that already exists is one thing. And if that's all you can do, then that's all you can do. What's the line? If you copy an idea, it's plagiarism. If you copy two ideas, it's innovation. The real key is the person that doesn't get hired because of their style. Who was that lady's name, Bill? So Lisa Crazy? What were you calling her?
Jane Crazy, I think.
Yeah, her biggest issue, she's got to get a different name. But
I just made it rough.
Yeah, so Jane Crazy, besides having the name issue, she doesn't want to be hired for her style. What you want to be known for is, I'm the person that you call when you want a whole new idea. A whole new idea. Because anybody can go to Midjourney and say, in the style of Jane Crazy, or in the style of Rembrandt. But who's the next Rembrandt? Who's the next Jane Crazy? And I think that's what you want to do. Although I gotta say, I love that John Knoll bringing his old school stuff into the future.
If it took Jane 10 years of study to get to the point where she could do that brilliant idea, can she do iterative brilliant ideas every week for her client? Or was there something special about the confluence of her training that made that moment of creativity spark in an unusual way? And is that reproducible every week for a client?
I guess what I would say, though, is that this whole concept of that someone would protect that is a very new concept, like the last 100 years, like since Mickey Mouse. Because before that, it only lasted for a little while. And before that, it just was, you were just an artist putting things together and selling them. And if someone else did something like it, it didn't really have, there was, that's been happening for a long time. And so
I think that Alex, the ability for Hello Kitty lunchboxes to hit the entire world in a month is different than it was back in the early days.
So if you look at, let's go back to the Middle Ages. The image obscura revolutionized how paintings were done. When you look at, so everyone was
camera
doing
obscura,
it by camera obscura. Camera obscura. What they were doing is going through a pinhole, and having it project of that person on a wall, on their canvas, and then they were sketching it all out and getting all the things right and painting against it. And that revolutionized. When you see that sudden realism, it's because they were doing that. And so it totally changed the way we did paintings. It made people who, it made it much more efficient. It made it much more real. It made it all those. There's a great, I can't think of it. There's a show about there's a great documentary about the person who started New Tech. I can't think.
Tim's Vermeil.
Tim's Vermeil, and you should watch that because he explores it as a person who's not an artist, goes back and builds that from scratch and proves that is, I think proves that it was done that way. And so this kind of technology happens all the time. Like it's been happening for a long time. We have a different way of putting that together. When photography came out, portrait painting went out the door. And suddenly everybody has to figure out something else to do because as photography, it didn't take very long for photography to take over from portrait painting because now everybody can just take a picture, And so this is stuff that we have to, and we can dance with it or resist it, but it's not going to. The resisting part is just going to hurt. Like it's not, because it's just going to keep going in that direction. Let's jump into the questions.
Here's one from Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, Colorado. Generative USDZ.
Go ahead, John.
So Adobe acquired Figma for $20 billion. They had their show in San Francisco last month called Config 2023, where they showed Gingerbread, which was generative 3D. And that's going to have USDZ output in it. And expect to see that at Max in October.
Yeah. Models are coming quickly. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida. Static shots with Photoshop backplates on numerous cameras possible for multiple angles on a live stream?
Probably not yet, but it's coming. Video, so if you look at runway.ai, you're looking at video being generated from AI prompts. And so, the video part is coming. Now, you can now in Midjourney render something out and then say, I want to pan this way. You can have an arrow and you can pan over and render the next section over and the next section over. And then you can bring it into your video package and kind of pan across it as well. You can also back up and do the same thing. So there's a couple different ways of managing that, but that'll keep on progressing as well. Next question.
Next question from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. What is the best free AI art generator and how does it compare to Photoshop?
Go ahead, John.
Midjourney used to be free, but not anymore. Midjourney's still outputting the best models because of their models is built from all of the stuff that's on the internet. Unlike Adobe's using all the stuff from Adobe stock, so they're using all licensed content. That's the reason why Midjourney's content's better. But having the tools in Photoshop facilitate the process of creating imagery, as you've seen here. But doing exactly what Alex just showed. I generate in Midjourney first, and I bring that stuff into Photoshop.
Next question.
Eddie Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida, asking, which version of Photoshop are you using to access these generative AI tools?
It's the Photoshop beta, which you can download. You got to just sign. You got to have a signed up account with Photoshop or with Adobe. I don't even think you have to have. I have a subscription to Photoshop, so that might be it. But I don't know if you need that or not. But it should be in the list of apps that are available as the Photoshop beta, and it's pretty slick. Next question.
Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, Colorado asks, monthly costs.
Monthly costs on Photoshop. Well, the beta is free right now, as far as I know. And again, I don't know whether you need a Photoshop license or not. You can get a Photoshop license, I think, for $10 a month, I think is the number that is out there. And so it comes with Photoshop and Lightroom, I believe. And that's kind of the base version of that. And but I don't know if you need that for the beta or not, because I already have it. Courtney?
And what's the cost of Midjourney Pro? Is it $20 a month now for the subscription?
So it depends on whether you buy it yearly or monthly, and it depends on how much rendering do you want to have available, and then it also depends on whether you want to be private or not. So you pay a little bit more for more rendering. You pay a little bit more. What I chose to do is go ahead and buy it for the year, probably last November or December. So I ended up paying about $50 a month for the top line. I just knew that I'm going to be using Midjourney all the time. I don't, and so I could get a rung down for $45 a month, or I could get for $3 more a month. If I was willing to commit to a year, I would get, 3 times or 2 times as much rendering. So for me, rendering fast privately is essentially, unlimited. I don't ever run into the limit at the end of the month. And so I just sit there and just generate whatever I want, at that level. But I think there's a $15 version that has some limits to it. And what you can do in Midjourney, for instance, is you can go in what we call relaxed, which means that it'll render a lot slower. It's putting you on back burner between people like me that just have it on fast all the time. And so if I'm trying to figure something out, I generally oftentimes will generate hundreds of images. So
Are the caps based on number of renders per time period, or just number of renders total? Or
it's processor time, and it's kind of hard to know exactly what it is. It just tells you where your processor time is. I don't know if it's a certain number of images.
35 for every 3 hours or something.
It's not per 3 hours; it's per month, and you can. And I did run into that cap the first time. That's why I increased it. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, do you think we'll see generative imagery extend to 3D?
Yeah, and we talked about that in the past, and we're absolutely going to see that. It's already happening. It's pretty simple right now, but it's going to be kind of amazing. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, absolutely. It like Alex just said, it already is. I'm seeing there's some plugins for Blender that are pretty amazing. And you got to think about what the implications of this. We were just talking about micro directability. 3D actually does give you the ability to start micro directing, because you can just make basic primitive shapes, click on it, give it a generative prompt and say, this is a tree, this is a boat, this is this. And then you have the ability to navigate a 3D scene. So it's definitely going to be a thing. And it already is starting.
I mean, it's going to be stunning, because you're going to be able to say, I want a willow tree blowing in the wind, and it's going to create that, it'd probably be Houdini or something like, but it'll just create that tree, and it'll have all the leaves, and it'll be blowing, and little things will be coming off of it, and all of that will be generated. All you'll be doing is moving that tree around. And if you want to take it over, you'll be able to grab onto it, and there's this mix of explicit control and explicit control, implicit and explicit control, that's going to happen as we keep on going forward, that is going to be truly amazing. And again, it's going to explode what anybody who has an idea can create. So while it is impinging on people who can do this, who are skilled, it's freeing up a lot of people with ideas. They have ideas of things in their mind, and they want to project those things in their mind into the real world. And their ability to do that is going to be pretty amazing. So that creativity will be opened up, because they don't have to know how to necessarily do the skill part. Next question.
Jack Ruppel in Breckenridge, Colorado has a question. Is Stream Deck in your workflow?
Stream Deck's in my workflow. It's not necessarily connected to what we're doing here, but definitely I've got a bunch of Stream Decks floating around. Next question.
And it's from Paul Wallace asking, can anyone at any level use Photoshop now without any learning curve due to generative AI?
I would say you can use. I mean, you can create generative AI without a lot of skill. You're just doing those things, but I mean, you need to have Photoshop skills to do anything with that generative AI past having it create something. Go ahead, Alan. I can't hear you, Alan.
All right, there we go. More so now than at any time before. Yes, most anybody can be a great artist just through prompting, right? At the very least, you're going to be able to make some great memes in Photoshop. I don't know if you're going to be able to do anything really high end, but right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, as a concept, and again, we are at the beginning. I mean, it's this is super early days. And I think that you're going to end up, again, seeing a whole new level of creativity that's coming out of this because people who have great ideas that don't know how to do it are going to be able to put those ideas out. Next question.
Dave Troutman from Edmonton, Canada. Can we call this Photoshop feature a reality paintbrush?
I think that's up to Adobe as to what we actually call it. But I'm sure I'm sure they're thinking about exactly what that's going to look like. Next question.
From Paul Wallace in Austin. What is the difference between AI art and generative art?
I don't think that there is. I don't know. We can make up a difference. I'm not sure if there's really any specific difference between those two. So, yeah. So there you go.
Semantics.
There's a little introduction to generative art in Photoshop. We're going to be talking about AI probably at least once a month. Because I think it's really important that we keep tracking it. This industry is going to move very, very fast, and I think it's important for all of us as a group to be paying attention to it and really tracking what we can and can't do. Hopefully, we inspired some of you to play with some of the new tools that Photoshop has. We're going to see it in other apps, but Photoshop is probably the furthest along as far as that little explicit. There's Project Firefly, there's Project Gingerbread, these are all things that you want to keep your eye on. And by the way, I just saw there's a woman who has been just doing tons of showing all this generative art and gathering people together and talking about it on Twitter. And I just saw that she just got hired by Adobe. And so it shows you why, like posting, whether it's doing something as simple as being on a panel like this, posting in Photoshop, when you're learning things, what she figured out how to do was use this content and use knowledge as a currency to keep on building that up and building up, people following her doing it. And so you want to think about not only how to do some of these things, but also think about how to teach other people how to do it, because she was just sharing everything she was learning as fast as she was learning it. And now she's working at Adobe to do it at a larger scale, I think. So it's just a good lesson for us to watch there. Thank you to the panel. Can't do this without you. So great to have a great conversation about first hour and second hour. Remember, this is the Tuesday is our graphics. So we'll be talking more and more about computer graphics, 2D, stills, video, 3D, vision, stereo, AI. Those are the things that we're going to be covering here on Tuesdays. So we really appreciate the panel here that answered those questions. Thank you to the producers who, of course, asked all the great questions, kept us going through the first and second hour. And thank you to the incredible team. There's this huge team of people who are producing the show, planning the show, building out all the development of the show. All of those things are being done by an incredible crew, and we really appreciate your contribution. We traveled the Tlaloc Traversal. We traveled 40,000 miles, 64,000 kilometers, and that's more than 317 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. Now I got to make an ocean with a ship.
See an illustration of the word gobsmacked.
Gobsmacked. I'll put that into Midjourney.
See what it comes
What is a gob? And if you smack it, does it break? Just want to
look like when it's smacked.
Either Midjourney will know, or it'll just make something up. It'll just go, well. But we could do it we have to do it Rembrandt lighting in the style of H.R. Giger. That'll be dark. Very, very dark. All right.
Pretty scary stuff, eh, kiddies?